All right, lads, how we going? Manny, Anil, thanks for joining us. How are you, Manny?
Morning stroke evening, I guess. Yeah, good mate, good mate. Yesterday's result was okay for us, so feeling good still, enjoying the weekend.
Awesome, mate. What about you, Anil? You still buzzing from that win?
Have to be. That's what football's all about. Been watching some of the vlogs that people put online. Normally, I hate vlogs, but when it's a game like that, you gotta love them. The emotion you see right at the end. I wish I was there, to be honest.
Awesome, man. I wish I was there too, but I enjoyed watching the view and we had a great time, and that's all that matters. Lads, basically, we're going to talk about today, and I'm sure everyone's wondering. We saw a lot of shades of Enzo Ball, three at the back, playing it at the back in that second half, and we're all wondering, are we going to shape up the same way? So just want to talk about today, the differences, about Enzo Ball and pretty much 4-2-3-1 and what most Premier League sides expect to play now. So it's going to go through our presentation today. Who was our best 11, Cooper Ball versus Enzo Ball? Start off with, this is just a real, watered down version, and I'll get you to further touch on this, lads. But formation fine-tuned by the Spanish between 2008 and 2012. Juan Marlilo is credited to have been the first manager to employ this shape and is currently Pep Guardiola's assistant manager. What are the pros of this? Sense of balance, allows fullbacks to push up in possession, two defensive midfielders and a double pivot as insurance in transition, and also allows the team to build and keep possession for large sustained periods. Anil, I'll start with you first, mate. I know that you want to elaborate on this much further. What are your opinions on the pretty much the most generic formation in the Premier League right now?
Well, that's the thing that we played under Claude Puel, and that was about as entertaining as watching paint dry. But he had, I think, the most archetypical 4-2-3-1 you'll ever know. You had James Maddison as the 10. You had Ricardo. You had Fuchs to begin with. Then Bill Chilwell came into the team. It's good. To be honest with you, what Forest are going to play against us on Friday. So you're going to see the best example. I'm not sure this guy created it, though. 4-2-3-1's been around for donkeys. But, it is, as you say, it's interesting how nowadays in the Premier League, that's the standard formation that even people like Sean Dyche play it. 4-4-2 is dead.
4-4-2 is dead. What are your thoughts, Manny? I know he didn't create it, but he's one of the first credited of really employing it successfully at a big stage. What are your thoughts, Manny?
Yeah, it's variations have been on it around since the 1970s. And then the 90s, it was updated by Johan Cruyff, and then Guardiola's updated it again with, I think Juan Malillo is still there. He's still working with Pep today. I think they've made a slight tweak to it at the moment with any defender that you want can slot into that double pivot role. So it doesn't have to be the right back. It can be anybody. So they've had John Stones doing it, for example, at times. And the focus for us has always been the right back popping in for that extra player. But if you're going to have the ball, or you expect to have the ball, or you have the players to retain the ball especially, then having that extra man in midfield is pointless having an extra defender. He's never going to be anywhere near the ball. So it's about sort of trying to create advantages based on a theory that you will retain the ball. And yeah, I love that.
You love that? All right, lads, let's move on. Some negatives. Requires constant communication, particularly the double pivot. For example, that's definitely Winks in the last game, absolutely screaming at Okoli where to put the ball because he's used to having Vestergaard, which we'll talk about later. Wingers need to be fast and dominant, be able to take on their man, which we have, fortunately. Wingers need to be able to link up with a strike and press hard to limit defensive options should the ball turn over. And on top of everything, they must track back, which also will go into the next formation we're going to discuss. Anil, any other thoughts you want to add to that?
Well, I'd say more than that. What I think the 4-2-3-1, why it started to get phased out a little bit for more sophisticated systems, is that you sometimes don't have enough people attacking going forward. So that's caused some issues. So it depends, because then some teams really push up the fullback to try and support again, and they move the wingers in a bit more central, but then you can get exposed in the gaps that they leave. So, for example, the reason why you've got people like Pep coming up with the inverted fullback is it means you can have another person. Because if you think about it, in 4-2-3-1, you've got 3 and a 1, that's 4, right? So you're only attacking with 4. And that can limit you if the opposition is going to be defending in a 4-4-2, which is what most teams defend in. So that's why, although teams normally start in a 4-2-3-1, teams are starting to go away from it a little bit, because that's, like I say, so actually Claude Puel, that team was pretty stable, but it was very boring because you weren't really taking that much of a risk in terms of going forward.
True. What are your thoughts, Manny?
I think the key battle is always the battle for the midfield. and it makes it a numbers game. So if you're going to play 4-2-3-1 and you're playing against somebody who's playing a 3-2-4-1, then you're always going to be a man down in midfield, but you'll have the extra man in defence. So what you're actually saying is, you guys can have the ball in the middle of the park, we can handle it. And it's a question of your preference, isn't it? Obviously, I think we prefer to have the extra man in midfield and try to be the team that's dictating play. There is negative side to both, but then the negative side for this side is that essentially you're relinquishing control of the game.
And therefore inviting pressure and wave after wave if someone were to shape up that way. Spot on, Manny. Enzo ball, 3-2-4 win in possession. So 3-2-4-1 in possession and 4-3-3 out, which would all hinge on Ricardo Pereira. We all missed this lots, but we saw, strong shades of it at the end of that game against Southampton. Let's move on. So if we were to go back to a 3-2-4-1, this is what I want to talk to you lads about. I know we're not managers, but we're all fanatical about this team. We all love to, romanticize and think of different ideas and what would work, and it's subjective and down to opinion. I'll start with you for this, Manny, because I'm kind of expecting what you're going to answer me with. These are our back three options: Okoli, FaZe, Yannick, JJ, and Cody. I haven't put Christensen in because I don't think he could play as a dominant back three as JJ, but again, that's subjective to opinion. If it were you and your back three, who would you select here?
Well, I'm going to look at it. If we're playing a back three, it's going to be similar to last year. So Fast is going to play. And Okoli will play in replacement of Callum Doyle, who we had last year. So the question becomes for one spot. It's either between Yannick and obviously JJ. And I think, unfortunately, Connor, though, I love him to bits. And he's almost playing like an assistant manager coach himself at the moment more than an actual player, which is fine because we love the guy and you need that element. If it's between Yannick and JJ, I would tend to go towards JJ. However, last year, this was the question that we had. This was the options. These were choices. And I'm going to bow to Enzo Maresca. He had this choice and he picked Yannick as the central one. Yannick is very good with the ball at his feet. And if you have Okoli covering there, he's a bit quicker than Callum Doyle. So we do have a little bit more advantage trying to sort of sweep up in case he gets himself in a mess. So I think my instinct would be JJ because I like the pace element, the athleticism. However, if it's ball control, then you probably want to have Yannick there.
Very interesting. And Neil, what are your thoughts?
Well, this is an interesting one because I think it depends on what you would go for, like as hypothetically the best versus what probably is the best. So I think if you're going to be hypothetically the best, I actually would add Christensen to this list and I would play him as the left side, the centre back. Manny made this point, I think, on your Good Morning Foxes, but the reason why Callum Doyle was in the team is that you want a left-footed player as your left centre-back. Yes, so there you go. Do again, please. Get that visualisation in, so the cross-field ball, so he can switch the ball out to Fatawu very quickly, and he can do it on his dominant foot. Also, more than that, it means the body shapes that they take when they're playing out. This is actually the real reason why they want the centre backs have different feet, like you see Man City and Arsenal do this, is that they can receive the ball on the half turn and play it straight away. You don't have to take the extra touch to come in on your stronger foot, which can kill your ability to play out. Because when you're under pressure, you want to play out from as fast as possible. You're trying to bait the other team into pressing and play out the space. So I actually think hypothetically the best team you could have probably would be Christensen. I actually would say Okoli, and I would probably say Fast. In terms of like an over, I don't know, maybe you could get JJ and then you could have Fast instead of Okoli. That's like hypothetical. What I would actually go for, I think right now, though, is I think I would go JJ on the left, Okoli in the middle, and Fast on the right. And so in both these examples, I've left out Yannick Vestergaard. Now, he was amazing last season. I do think he could play a role. But I think, to be totally honest, right, the brutality of the Premier League, the ruthlessness of it, having someone as slow as that, you're going to be asking for trouble in the team, right? Because yes, he could get on the ball and dictate it, but what would happen is you get up to the halfway line and it doesn't even have to be him that loses the ball. You get caught in transition and you're a man down because he's not going to get back in time. Whereas having someone who's faster is going to help you. And I just think you have to be realistic and think Leicester, unlike in the Championship, you're not going to be dominating the ball as often. So you're probably better off having a player who isn't quite as good as distributing the ball out, but is much better at getting back, because you're more likely going to need the getting back aspect than the playing out. Maybe I could be proven wrong. Like I said, I wouldn't have any problem whatsoever with Yannick playing. He played some of the early games in the season too. But I think if you're trying to get the best overall balance from the team, I just think you've seen it. Every single game we've played so far, it's just been transition city. So being strong in transition is extremely important, and therefore having kind of combinations of players is useful.
I spot on was going to say exactly. So I expected, but we talked just quickly before the stream started, and I said, Manny, I expect you probably to disagree on something, and it was Yannick, and we'll get into our starting 11 soon, right? And I spot on agree with each argument, but what Anil just said is pretty much bang on the money. We're not going to expect to have, we can play possession-based football, but the quality of the sides that we're playing against is nowhere near the same as the championship, and no one near the amount of teams are going to park a bus in front of us like they did the championship. So therefore, did that give, Yannick, a little bit of extra time, obviously a lot more comfortable on the ball. If we were having wave after wave and transition and pressure, would Yannick still be able to play that effective, even let's say hypothetically, Manny, if Enzo was still here?
I think Anil makes some fabulous points, and I agree with what he's saying. I think the slight difference, and going into the Premier League, if I was Enzo, I would be worried about Yannick on transition. I think the slight difference between last year is that you'd have a Coley covering you as opposed to Callum Doyle. So there is that that is a little bit more pace and a bit more strength. But I essentially am not the largest fan of Yannick Vestergaard because of the pace element. And it's a trade-off, isn't it? It's between that extra ability on the ball and the extra height, which is always useful at set pieces. And, we conceded about 57 corners in a row or something before we got one ourselves. So we do need that element of height too. If it was me, the solution is somebody we just don't have, which is a big, strong, quick baller left footer, which is asking for a lot, isn't it? But that profile is kind of what we're looking for. So we're putting a sticking plaster over something that, we can improve on down the line. But I do like the left-footed angle. I think my question mark for you boys is, do you think Akoli has a left-footed diagonal in him?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure JJ has that either. I think they'd have to spend a lot of work on the training ground for that. That you can play it with your right foot, but as we say, it's going to take a bit longer, that fraction of a second, which might not make it as fast. So that is a bit of an issue. Just quickly on the Yannick thing, I would say, though, that we're up against Forest this week, and Forest are going to play Chris Wood. And Chris Wood isn't the fastest either. So to be honest with you, if there was a game that you were going to play him in, this would be a very good one, because the transitional threat's going to come down the wings in Elanga and HudsonAdorov. Well, that's what your wide centre-backs will be there dealing with. So actually, I don't know, if you wanted to go for this game specifically, you might argue, especially as well, that Nuno, the way that he plays, they're the second lowest for possession in the league. So there's something to think there. But yeah, coming back to a left foot diagonal, I was surprised actually that we signed Akoli, even though he's impressed me, and I think he's been a good signing. We were linked with quite a few left-footed centre-backs, and we didn't sign any of them. And I was like, okay, well, fair enough. But I do wonder if Akoli would have been, if Maresca would have agreed to that if he was still here, put it that way. I was really convinced that there was a left-sided centre-back that had been lined up to be signed in the summer, but we went for Akoli.
We'll put that on the burner, the question mark for the season, because the January transfer window next summer, I'm sure we'll get to one point. What players do we need? What positions do we need? And there's definitely one we're looking for. So if you see a left-footed guy who can zing the ball 40, 50 yards, let me know.
We'll look forward to that conversation. Let's move on. Fullback options if we were to play a 4-2-3-1. Ricardo, free Ricardo. James Justin, Victor Christensen, Thomas, and Hamza. I don't really fancy Hamza as a right back, and I don't really want him to, but he's an option. And Thomas as well. Unfortunately, the lad's damaged goods, I think, after what he's been through under Rodgers and also Borough and also Sheffield. So poor lad, but he's there as an option. Probably going to see him cup games. Basically, most people would agree that JJ and Ricardo, if we are going to play a 4-2-3-1, should be your fullbacks. I'll start with you first, Anil. Would you still keep Christensen in, or if you had the option to play JJ and Ricardo purely because of everything we just discussed with that left-footed option? Or as we've talked a lot about before, we don't see very much of it from Victor, to be fair.
Well, one thing I dispute a little bit is I would say that we don't play 4-2-3-1, and we haven't played 4-2-3-1 all season. Not in the way that you've described it at the start of this show, because Coop is using that 3-2-5 shape. So, for example, if we did actually play, like I say, the boring Claude Puel 4-2-3-1 system, that is actually what I thought Steve Cooper was going to do at the start of the season, because as Nuno's doing at Forest, it's a defensive option, but it makes you strong stability and it still carries a threat. And to be honest with you, if you're a team that just wants to stay up in the Premier League, it's a pretty good pick that you can have if you played that way. But we don't play that way. So if we did actually play just a regular 4-2-3-1, I would argue that having a left-sided fullback to put the crosses in would be quite good. And in that case, Victor Christensen would be quite good in that. But we're not. We're playing this kind of 3-2-5, which is like Enzo's system, but it's different. And it's different because the fullbacks on either side, when they go forward, they have to push up massively. And then whoever the wide player is comes in field. So that's a bit different. So I think if you're going to play that system, I mean, look, TLDR, I would always put JJ and Ricardo in. I think they're our best of these players that you've got here. But like I said, I wouldn't really call it like a typical 4-2-3-1 because they're not being used that way. And actually, that is maybe something that we should think about. Like, say, for example, when we're playing Arsenal, I actually think we should have just played a regular 4-2-3-1. Like, it would have been way more stable rather than leaving JJ 2-on-1 against Martinelli and friggin' Leandro Trossard all game long, which didn't seem like the smartest idea to me.
What are your thoughts, Manny?
I'm a little bit different with the fullbacks. I think if you're going to play traditional, at least fullbacks as we think of them, then I want a right footer and a left footer, and I would go with JJ, and I would go with Victor on the left. If we're going to go to a different formation, then Ricky P comes in straight away. Reasoning, I think right-footed left-backs never work. I can't think of one apart from Philippe Lahm in the history of football that I could think of that's worked. There are always stop gaps because you haven't got someone you love, so you're kind of filling in a hole there. It just doesn't work. And we've tried JJ there across multiple phases in previous managers' roles, and he's never been able to retain the position. And from memory, whenever he plays there, it's just the same tendency they all have. They all want to cut into their right-hand side. They always want to cut to their right-hand side. And that just ends up meaning they can't stay wide on the touchline, so you just don't keep your width. And you kind of, with Mavididi there, it was always trying to cut inside, well, often trying to cut inside. I think they're going to get in each other's way because JJ doesn't want to necessarily overlap to the touchline on the left-hand side. And we saw, I think it was the very first game, the Tottenham game, when Victor actually got quite forward. He put a cross in. It ended up with Vatawu, who crossed it in for Vardy's goal. Well, I think what we need to see is more of that. You know, we need to see Victor actually getting forward and actually getting towards the touchline because he's got a half-decent left foot delivery. I just think because we're not quite seeing the best of him, or I didn't think he was too bad at the weekend, fans are sort of clamouring for JJ. But we've got to remember, he's 21 years old. He qualified for the Champions League with Bologna last year as a 21-year-old. And the 6 months that he was with us, he was actually half-decent in the season we went down. So I think stick with him. He's one of those, he's a developing player. He's 21 years old. Give him a full season's practice next year. You'll have that option as a benefit. However, having said all of that, him and JJ just don't play in my team because I want Ricky P plus 3 centre-backs. So,
well, let's talk about that. Let me come back to you with this then, Manny. One, do you think that Victor Christensen, other than his ball over the top and a cross in the box, playing it out the back on the ground, let's say passing it, I think he's very poor. And the same thing applies to him with turning and looking for his left foot. So a lot of the times I think he gets a lot of that play breaks down to Victor Christensen. It's been my biggest criticism of him this season. Although, like you just mentioned, I do think he had a good game against Southampton. But then again, do you think that we saw, I liked him as well for the 6 months he was here before Dean Smith came on. But do you think that is because he was able to get up the pitch a lot easier because Brendan Rodgers played a high line?
I think for me, he looks confused, as in when he gets the ball, inevitably in the Premier League, it's under pressure. And he's looking for an option. And normally, if you have a preset patterns of play, you know, I've got an option straight down the line, I've got an option inside, I've got an option square. You know, they're your 3 sort of standard places you're looking at. But he's looking, and Mavididi's either covered or not in free, or we're playing too deep, so there's not an advanced option. And it's not always easy to find an out ball. And it's not as if we traditionally sort of lump it to Vardy and hope he's going to be able to hold it up too much. So he ends up pumping it. And if you end up pumping it, you're going to lose accuracy and we end up giving the ball away. And I think a little bit is because not just him, but a lot of the players are that confused as if I get the ball, what am I being expected to look to do instantly without me just trying to see what's available in the game? What's my preset idea about what I'm trying to do? And I think he's a little bit confused in that area.
Therefore, a system issue, would you say, Anil?
Say it again, sorry.
Therefore, going by what Manny was saying, it's a system issue potentially.
System issue, but I mean, it's coaching. I mean, in any system, you could know where players are going to stand. I definitely agree that, like, you saw it all last season, that whenever a player would receive the ball in a certain position, they could play the pass blind even, and you knew that someone was going to be running into the space. Like, that is, in a nutshell, why system football has become so successful. Because the thing is that even if you're an elite level player, that second or 2 seconds that you've got to take to scan and make the right decision, if you don't have to do that, that's 2 seconds faster that you can play the ball. And that can be everything at the elite level to make that half a yard that's just going to open up the space. So I think that is a flaw of Cooper. In fact, I wouldn't just say Steve Cooper. I notice it a lot, I think, amongst British managers, that it's not something that I think they fully understand how to grasp and structure that, so that teams are, it's all about the shape, but it's at different phases of the game, and it does take a long time to coach it and drill it in. But once it works, then you have a very fluid team and system.
My contention on that excellent point is the game is getting faster and faster always. It's always getting faster, which means you have less time to think all the time. So the whole point of a detailed system and a way to play is that the thinking's already been done. You kind of just know what you're supposed to do straight away. So you don't have to hesitate or think for that split second. And that split second is the difference. There's a difference between someone who's chasing you down and getting to you, and you getting the ball out of the way and you playing through them. So it's just about trying to preload a lot of that mental thought. And I think, coming back to Victor briefly, is he's struggling with that moment's thought of what am I supposed to do? Whereas if it's pre-ingrained into you, you already know before you get the ball, I'm going to have to do this. And if it goes wrong, you also know that it's not my fault, because the manager keeps drilling it into me that that's what he wants me to do. So it also gives you a kind of mental freedom in a way. So I like the thinking kind of system as always.
So for everything you just said, sorry, Neil, you're bang on, by the way. So that's why we're sorely missing Enzo, because it was that well drilled into the players that they knew what they had to do. And also going back to what we spoke about last time I spoke to you, Manny, was that you don't think that Cooper has it in his wheelhouse to be able to set us up, or at least coach the players the exact same way Enzo done. Therefore, it's a shame the massive difference between quality and between Enzo and Cooper. What would your thoughts be on that, Anil? I know we've talked about it a lot, but I think that's the biggest telltale sign of the difference.
Well, as I say, that's something that he's got to work on. You see it amongst many British managers, the inability to do that. I mean, I will say one thing, though. I feel like if Arsene Wenger was joining in this call, which of course is pretty unlikely, but if he was, I know that he really hates system football, because he thinks that what's happening, especially amongst young players, is that you're just getting generic players and they're not able to understand the game for themselves. So as you say, they're like, oh, it's not my fault, boss. I passed it down the line like you told me to, and there was someone there. It's your fault, not mine. Whereas obviously, if we were playing amongst our others, you'd be like, Anil, what are you doing, you idiot?
It's a fabulous point, Anil. I think that's why Cole Palmer left Man City, because he just didn't want to be part of a system. He wanted to be freer and express himself a bit more, and he just didn't want to be tied down to a very specific role.
He's ended up with Maresca and probably going to have it.
Yeah, I was waiting for that. Nate, how are you, mate? Thank you for tuning in. All right, guys. Well, after this, we'll get into the 11. But this is where I think, in my opinion, we have the most depth, and it's quite interesting. And there's a multiple amount of conversations you can have about starting 11s, particularly depending on who you're playing. But as the double pivot options, we've got Ricardo Pereira, Harry Winks, Ndidi, Skip, Sumari, and Hamza Chowdhury. Now, I think there's some serious depth here, lads, that you could rotate between and have starters and finishers if required, although I don't think it's really a position other than this last weekend, actually. But what are your thoughts on the depth that we have, Manny, in a double pivot?
We've got a lot of options there, haven't we?
Yeah.
And a lot of options with fairly similar profile. The options that I don't like amongst that is the lack of athleticism in there. Sumare's too sluggish. Hamza's going to get booked pretty quickly because he's going to smash someone within about 3 seconds. Skip, we need to see more of. And Ndidi has got what I want. Winks has got the technical ability, but not quite the physicality. Ricky P, I mean, I don't think I could say anything bad about the guy. I just love him too much. So out of those options, though, like I said, I think I've said previously on other streams, it all comes as little pairings. And Winks and Ricardo have played 44 odd games together doing this. They know the detail of this. They know where they're supposed to be. They know what they're supposed to do. And I would probably take those two and move Ndidi into an 8 spot. Just like Maresca did last year. Right 8, him and Fatawu had a good link. So I would normally like Ndidi somewhere in that place. But if we're going to play the Enzo Pep way, then Winks and Ricardo.
Well, let's get into that, Anil. How do we shape up going forward? We just saw what happened in the last game. We know that it's still there, and there was players that weren't even there under Enzo ball that slotted in pretty well. Are we going to shape up against Forest? You know, if a back three, this remains to be seen. This is what I would like to see. This is what, if we're going to go, I know, Anil, you don't think it's a 4-2-3-1, but before ball's kicked, that's how we shape up, in my opinion. We know we move around a lot. If we're going to go with a back four, Ricardo Pereira. Now, let's talk, before I go into this 11, I just want to clarify that you talked about, Anil, last time that, you wouldn't be surprised if we were to play a back three, but Fatawu would come in as basically a right wing back. Yeah, you said yes? Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking the way that Cooper plays is that, well, look, firstly, we haven't seen Ricardo in the league all season long. Admittedly, I think if there was a game to do it, he might do it in this one just because he's seen how effective the system was at the end of the Southampton game. But yeah, my expectation is that it will be this team, but instead of Ricardo, it'll be Fatawu will be starting as the right back and he'll pushing up all along the wing. And then instead of Ricardo, you'll probably have El Canous, who was in the team last time around. That's what I think is going to happen. Christensen's going to come out and Fatawu is going to come in. That's what I think he's going to go with.
I think that's a mistake, Manny. I think that's just the same thing, that you're going to have the same issue where we're left exposed as you would with JJ, purely just because if he's going to push up the field, as you just mentioned earlier, where we have one fullback in our system that pushes up the pitch. Yeah. If we lose the ball in transition, Fatawu is expected to do the exact same thing JJ is expected to do, and JJ is an actual fullback. Fatawu was brilliant for his defensive tracking back last season, don't get me wrong, but I think that's a serious issue in that right-hand side. If we were to play a back four, Ricky P, Faze, Akoli, and JJ is who I'd like to see. Double pivot, Ndidi and Winks. There could be an argument for Skip. There's lots of decent arguments to have here. Buonanotte is your 10. He's undroppable now. And Fatawu and Mavididi, you have to start them. Like, it's just criminal not to. And Vardy up front. Any changes that you would... I'll start with you, Manny. What would you change to this?
Is this the team that you would like, or you think that he's going to play?
Okay, bit of both. I'm going to go through the next formation next, but if it were going to be a back four, this is the formation I would like to see.
If you're going to play in that way that you've described there, I would make a few changes. I think I would still go with JJ right back. I don't think we need Ricardo dropping into midfield in this particular system. You're going to lose some width. So I'll keep JJ. I like my left footer at left back. I'm afraid. I know that's not popular, but I'm going to stick with my left footer at left back. I would go for Skip over Winks in this formation because I think you're going to need his legs, his mobility. He's going to need to cover a lot more ground. So you won't have the support, especially if Mavididi and my wingers are playing quite advanced. That's a lot of territory for Winks to cover on that left-hand side. And I do worry about sort of dangers from the opponent's right. I think who's going to got the weekend? They've got Alanga at the weekend. I don't think I really want sort of Alanga bearing down on Christensen without some help from that player. And Winks isn't going to inspire me to, so I'd probably choose Skip there. The rest of it, your front four, all good. All good.
All good. Anil, what are your thoughts?
I mean, you can go many ways. There's a different way to say it. To be honest with you, I think we're in a place where until we start seeing this, you can't really make a comment. I think that is fair to say that, like, Winks has looked a bit leggy this season. Like, for example, against Fulham, the winning goal that they scored with Iwobi, you saw Winks running back like mad and he just couldn't get there. It looked like he was running in treacle. Admittedly, he took a bit of a bad starting position, so I don't think that helped him. And again, that's what we're saying. In the Premier League, it's like that initial even body position can kill you because you just haven't got the run on it. We would have to say. I mean, as I've said, I would play a slightly different system to this anyway. But I think he is going to do something like this. Like I said, Manny said this is some previous things. I think one step at a time, Cooper is working out why Enzo had his system the way that he did. So every game, he's basically getting one step closer, but still doing one fatal mistake till he works it out. And as I say, I think in Southampton, he's worked out, oh, having two wingers works really well, so I'm going to do that. The next mistake he's going to realise is, oh, but that winger can't start in the right back position because they're going to get overloaded. But I think he's going to make that mistake in this match. And then I wouldn't be surprised if by the time he gets to Ipswich, he put someone in there to fix it. That's my prediction, but look, I'd love to be proved wrong. The only thing I can say, which is interesting, is that I personally think in the second half, our manager was actually Harry Winks. That's genuinely how it felt. And I think that if that's the case, Winks might sort it out and he might tell Cooper, no, do it like this and put Ricky P in for this reason. But we shall see.
He had a strong sense of authority, didn't he, when he came off? And that was where I give Cooper his roses. He came on at halftime and he was screaming at a call. He dictated everything playing out the back and he was massive. Right. This is what I genuinely want to see. This here is what I want to see. And I think we'll all agree, except maybe Yannick Vestergaard for yourself, man, in the middle. But I think O'Coley will continue to develop. But Faze on the right, Coley in the middle, and Justin on the left. Now, you probably want Christensen still, but I just think Christensen's too poor playing it out the back. Harry Winks and Ricardo's your double pivot. Now, this is where things get interesting for me. You've got Buonanotte and Ndidi's your box crashes. You could make an argument for Bilal in there, but basically Ndidi and Buonanotte are both undroppable. Bilal would be a great option as a finisher. Mavididi and Fatawa, again, the wings, undroppable. And Vardy, stretch the pitch wide. You've got your wingers to track back if required with that to assist the back three. And you've got Harry Winks dictating everything out of the back three in that double pivot position. And should we lose the ball in transition, we all know Ricardo Pereira is going to drop back into that back four position. So Ricardo Pereira is the only person, in my opinion, that can play in that inverted fullback, which is, it's a very, very high level position to do. And also, there's not many people of that caliber that can do it. And therefore, I think it's fucking criminal that he's not playing. It's absolutely crazy. I called out 2 weeks ago that I think Ricardo Pereira is going to start against Forest, and I'll tell you why now. One, I think that I was expecting us to lose the last 2 games. I was really Cooper out, and I'll give him his credit. I thought he was going to be under immense pressure, and I thought that this would be the game where he would and it shows in the last game, we changed to basically Enzo Ball in the last 20 minutes. Was that pressure? Was that fan pressure? Was it the players? We'll never know. But in my opinion, Ricardo Pereira will be starting this. And I think that really showed that if we are going to have an inverted, fullback, that Ricardo Pereira is the only man to do it. He took Christensen off. It's the only game he's been taken off. And I thought JJ played much better on the left-hand side. Yes, we're missing that left-footed cross. But I just think that it would make much more sense to play and shape up this way. But this is my subjective Australian opinion from down under, and I have no coaching badges whatsoever. What are your thoughts? I'll start with you, Manny, and what you would like to see.
You've absolutely knocked it out of the park. That is bang on. We could argue about the left centre back, and that's the only position in that team that I would dispute. We've talked about the various merits of Vestergaard versus Christensen versus Justin, and that would be the weekly debate. This is exactly the right team that I would pick. The one negative side I can see on the surface is that Buonanotte is not quite in the central role that he has been successful in. But Buonanotte has been fabulous wherever he's played for us, where he's been on the right wing, where he's in the middle, wherever he gets the ball, because he's a baller. He can beat the first man for fun. He's got an eye for a pass. He's strong enough to handle pressure. He can play anywhere. And it's also a bit confusing because he might be down here as a kind of left 8, but he's going to drift into awkward spots. But it gives Mavididi extra option. If you want to double Mavididi, then he can lay it off to Buonanotte, and you guys are in big, big trouble. And the same for the flip side. We know Fatawa and Ndidi have had a lovely combination last year, working to them, doing those little triangles down the right-hand side. So, Luke, mate, that is our winning team right there. You just nailed it.
Thank you, good sir. And Manny, Neil, let me ask you this, because I forgot to mention this earlier, going back to before. Do you think one of the reasons why we're so exposed, let's say, for example, how we shaped up that first half last week, that Buonanotte was the right winger, not Fatawu. We all know he drifts into the middle, into that 10 position, quite similarly, as I keep mentioning, as James Maddison under Brendan Rodgers. Therefore, he's not tracking back, and JJ is expected to be a right winger and a right wing back. Hence why I think if Fatawu was tried that position for JJ, it would still be detrimental to our performance in our side, particularly in transition. Why don't you talk to me about that, Anil, and what your thoughts are?
Well, I'll tell you what, shall I present my screen? You've already seen it
Yes.
in my video, but I think it's the best way
Yeah, of
to
course,
sort
mate.
of talk through it. So this is a little bit hypothetical stroke Disneyland. So you got to bear with me. It's not 100% what you would or you wouldn't see. You just bring it up on screen there, please, Lou. So I'm using tactical board here. So what I'm going to pretend here is that we're going to be starting with a goal kick with Mads. So Forest have just completed an attack and the ball's been collected by Mads Hermansen, right? So you can see that at this point we were defending in a 4-4-2. Now you brought up two systems. So what I've said is that what Steve Cooper's been doing so far is that this right-sided player, which would be James Justin, or I think it's going to be Fatawu, is the winger, but they're starting all the way back as a fullback, and you've got Buonanotte in front of them. So what you'll see as the move progresses is that as soon as we're getting out, you can see that, okay, now Fatawu's moved into the right wing position and Buonanotte's moved in centrally. So that's what he's doing, right? And you can see that you've got the three-man shape here, and Hermansen has stepped up to be essentially the centre-back to create some space. So they've got some passing lanes, because what we're trying to do is find a spare man that we can get the ball to, right? That's the idea. Get a free per. That's why we're doing the whole 3-2-5 shape in the first place. So we've done that. In this case, we've got Buonanotte. He's going to play it back to Ndidi. It's a pretty common. So I'll pause it again here. Again, this sort of thing, you do see it happen from time to time. Fatawu's moved up. He's not quite as far as up as Mabadidi because he started from deeper, but Mabadidi's pushing up. You've got Bardi. Oops, sorry about that. You've got El Kanoussi. So Ndidi's going to do this, and he's going to play a long diagonal ball trying to find Mabadidi, which in my opinion would be a bit lazy, but Steve Cooper prefers to go a bit more direct than Enzo. If this was Enzo, there'd be more passing about. So he's going to play it long. He's going to try and find someone there. And let's just say, for argument's sake, it gets cut out by one of their centre backs, which could happen, right? It's just a 50-50, just happens to win it. So now Forest have got the ball. And we know that with Forest, the way that they play is they're going to go fast on transition. So what are they going to do? And they're going to probably try and hit one of their wingers quickly. And if I was Nuno, I'd be like, well, the player that you should try and hit is you want to play it to the left-hand side. Why do you want to do that? Well, because we know about this problem that they've got down the right-hand side of Leicester. So here we go. He's going to play it long, and boom, you're going to try and find HudsonAdorov. And here is basically the problem. Right, if you compare it to the other side, because Fatawu is so up high and Buonanotte is drifted in centrally, they've got more space here than maybe you would like. And what's happened is Fast is having to come out to maybe help out here. What tends to happen actually is Fatawu might be a bit deeper. We saw a goal like this that Fulham scored against us. And so what's going to happen here is he's going to play the bounce pass Moreno, trying to get the ball off him. But now, basically, because you've got a man out of position, this could very well happen. You could probably see exactly this sort of scenario, unfortunately, unfolding on Friday night. So you play the ball now, and now you've got the danger thing where HudsonAdorov got behind Fast, and because Fast is out of position, now you've only got a Coley, and they've got like a 3-on-2 or a 3-on-3 at the back here, and then HudsonAdorov could either cut in himself and shoot, or in this case, I'm going to say he's going to make a pass. He's going to pass it to Wood because Wood scored a lot of goals, and he's going to get a free chance, and that could be it. And that is exactly what we don't want to see. So really, what I'm saying here is this is kind of the disadvantage, is that because Fatawu was pushed up so high and someone's had to come across, that you've got a potential weakness. And we've seen this quite a lot this season's happened to us. So what is the other thing that we could do? So the other thing we could do is we could go for this is what would happen if we played the inverted player, whoever that player is. So here you've got Ricardo, and you can see that from the goal kick, he's moving into the middle next to Wicks. Similar shape. You see the difference here is that Fatawu, because he started up high, he hasn't had to move forward. And so what you're going to basically get, the TLDR, is that Fast, although he's still going to probably be, tracking, well, HudsonAdorov is going to be tracking him because we're on the attack, is you've got like more options here. So same exact scenario. They've won the ball back. They've played it across. But now you can see, because you've got Ricardo there, you've got more men available around. So you're getting a bit more support on either side if we go there. Assuming the athleticism is there, which, as Manny's pointed out, is still a big issue. Right. And because you've got more men, look, just to say again, with my sort of Disneyland dreamland scenario, Forest could still expose this, by the way. We got exposed several times last season, even though we played this system. But on paper, it's going to give you more likelihood. So here we go, Ricardo and Fatawu, and we're going to win the ball back. So here we go, Ricardo's got the ball. Now, because we've won the ball back, he can play the ball forward to Fatawu. And now we've got the attacking five. And there, just because I know you would like it there, you see Buonanotte is making his run into the half space, because that's like the classic, or it could be Ndidi. I'll explain why I put them on this side, because I think Enzo would start them this way and flip them over at 60 minutes. Fatawu can cut in, and I'm just going to say just because he's the star boy, he's going to put it into the top corner. But that is obviously the dreamland scenario. But forgetting that, that's just my point, is that watching this move again, is that it gives you a bit more protection if you lose the ball on the wings on transition. And it's simply because this player has got less distance to cover, if you think about it. Because otherwise, if the player starts here and they've gone all the way up there, you're making 60 to 70-yard runs consistently across the game. And even if you're JJ with his stamina, you're going to get tired. Whereas in this example, because the player has just drifted in from the middle to here, it's easier. And let's say that Forest get a sustained spell of pressure, which will happen, and you have to go back to the initial shape. Well, in the initial shape, let's take it all the way back. Right, then you're still in this 4-4-2 shape, and then Ricardo is just playing as a regular right back, and Ricardo knows how to play right back because he's literally spent years doing it. So that's basically the difference between the two systems. Now, I have to say that I presented this on Fox's talk, and I got absolutely mullered by someone who said, yeah, but hang on a minute, that didn't we get exposed with Ricardo at the back end of last season playing the inverted fullback, which is a fair point. You have to say there. Like, if you just wanted to be stable, you could not try and do that at all. But yeah, that's what I think we're going to do. But unfortunately, my prediction, like I say, is I don't think Ricardo will start, and I think we will do the first thing. And unfortunately, I think we might get exposed. And I think that might be the painful lesson that Cooper has to learn for this match. Because as per Manny, I think he's going to need in Ipswich to finally be like, okay, I've solved it, lads. I've got it. I've figured it out. I know what to do here.
I think he's going to keep JJ at right back because he'll just look at it and say they've got HudsonAdorov, and I prefer JJ as a one-on-one. He's slightly quicker. But I'm not sure that the thinking is quite legitimate. You see what Walker Peters did to JJ for the second goal. Yeah. One step over, he bought the dummy straight away. He was done. So it's rather than thinking about how do we protect ourselves against their threats, that fundamental mentality is let them worry about us and let them worry about Fatawu attacking them. So HudsonAdorov's job isn't to attack the fullback; it's to provide help for his left back to protect him against Fatawu. And so, yeah, that having that extra man in midfield means that we are, again, dictating the game to them. Of course, you are going to get yourself in situations on transition playing that way where you are going to get caught out. We see it. We see Man City when we beat them 5-2, I think it was the Etihad. We were catching them out for fun. But that's a rarity. It doesn't happen every week if you have sufficient caliber of players. So yeah, I think I would rather avoid the whole thing by placing the ball essentially in an average position higher up the pitch. But it's a preference, isn't it?
So we're all in agreement that moving forward, to wrap this video up, we need to be playing the back three. We need to be forcing those overloads and attacking with 5 instead of 3, with sometimes it even being in the past under Cooper 3 defensive midfielders. And if we're going to get caught out in transition, our wingers are going to be able to stretch the pitch and be able to track back, as we've seen under Enzo. And we lose the ball so much, building the ball through the middle. If we're not going to hoof it forward, which we've been doing fucking heaps, and that was painful the first half at Southampton, we're inviting pressure by constantly turning the ball over, these aerial balls going over the top. And also we're building through the middle with much less players than we're used to under Enzo. So it showed. Granted, they were one man down, but they were starting to dominate the game even before Fraser got sent off in that second half of Southampton. But Manny, you're in agreement. Back 3, you want to see back to the same as last season? Or do you think it's too dangerous?
Definitely not too dangerous. I've heard this before, saying you can't play this way in the Premier League, but every time we look good, it's because we're playing this way, right? The last half an hour, it's because we went back to this way we started looking good. And when we actually try to play some good quality football in an attacking sense, we actually look pretty capable doing it. And I think, again, it's that inferiority complex, thinking that it doesn't translate or we can't do it. I made this point on Blue Tinted Glasses a week or so ago. If you were looking for a system today, if you were just come in from planet Mars and you think, I'm going to give a football system to Leicester City, the first thing you'd ask is, well, what have you been doing recently? And for the last 7-8 games, we've been tweaking. We've been doing one system here, one change there, personnel there. Last year, pretty much the same thing every game. A few personnel changes, but the same system. So the players are fully trained in the system of last year. They had 46 games playing it, and there was nothing else. There was no deviance, no variation. I think Mark Albrighton said in the podcast that they didn't do any defensive work. They just did 3 or 4 patterns of play, and they just drilled it over and over and over again. And a lot of their sessions were actually tactical sessions, and they're explaining to the players why this is so crucial. I think it's lower risk to go back to what the players actually know really intimately.
you really banged the nail on the head. So would you say, Neil, for everything that Manny just said, which is spot on, how much it's so ingrained in the players under Enzo because of everything you just said, drilling, one style, one identity. People complain about it, but at least it's ingrained in the lads. Cooper made the right subs, but how much of that is muscle memory from under Enzo last season? Do you think we can continue to do it? As you said, Manny, it's a cheat code playing that way, and I think we've already demonstrated. Granted, a league below, but I think we've already demonstrated that we can play this, and the players, from what I see, prefer playing that way.
I want to make this point that in all my years of watching football, which is about 35 odd, this is the first time I can ever remember whereby multiple clubs, big clubs especially, play exactly the same way. This has never happened before in football. And I've read a list: Man City, Arsenal, Man United, Chelsea, Bayern, Barca, Leverkusen, Brighton, Spain, and last year, Leicester. And pretty much, you could throw in Burnley then for a bit too, I suppose, and to a certain extent, Southampton. But when have you ever had 8, 9, 10 big clubs playing an identical way? They've all recognised something. They all have teams of people trying to study this stuff, and they've come to the conclusion, for example, Bayern, that despite Vincent Kompany taking Burnley down, this guy, what he's trying to do is translatable. So let's get him into our team. And everybody can see, the big boys can see. We were so lucky that we were on this train, and I'm so gutted. It's why I started coming up on this. I just think, whoa, we had the perfect idea. And we've just spent 45 minutes going back into systems. As far as I'm concerned, this debate was already done. We had this debate last year. It's already been proven. We're just faffing about until we finally, bit by bit, get to where we already were. And I don't want to criticize anyone too much. Maybe there's just a realization thing that fans and the owners and everybody needs to come to, is that we were on the right lines. And if you read between the lines of every time you speak to one of the players, how often do you get a player this season talking about a manager from last season? Wout Fast goes back to Belgium on international duty. They give him an interview. So, how's it been going? You're back at Leicester. How's the difference? Well, do you know, last year we were playing this brilliant kind of football that everything's fantastic. And you ask Connor Cody, you get him onto BBC. He's not talking about he's not in the team. He's not talking about Steve Cooper. He's not talking about this season. He's talking again about last season, because the players are trying to tell us we had the answer. What are we doing? And the second we go back to the answer against Southampton midweek, Winks suddenly looks good again. Fatawi's killing it again. This is like deja vu. We've been here before. We just need to wake up, go back to what we were doing. What we were doing is the most advanced way that's ever been constructed in the history of football. Big boys are throwing money at it. It's got nothing to do with experience and the rest of it. It's got to do with training. And I think the final point I'm going to make on that is, we keep asking, can Steve Cooper play this way? Steve Cooper can change the formation. Steve Cooper can get the players doing mostly what they were doing. But there is a huge amount of detail that goes into this, within this structure, specifically on shape and distances and stuff. And I'm not qualified, sadly, to be able to do that. But I know Pep Guardiola is the master of it. And everybody who is a disciple of his is getting a big job around Europe. It doesn't matter about their experience. Arteta had no experience. Maresca had little experience. Kompany had little experience. And they're all at big clubs. So I just want to find somebody who can repeat what we were doing last year. And anybody who's been directly trained by Pep is our answer. If Steve Cooper wants to take the next international break and go and spend 2 weeks with Pep getting this stuff refined, please do it. Whatever you need to do, Pep had the answer. And if you can't go directly to him, but look at his disciples too, because they're just copying and pasting. Slight tweaks.
I was going to say, Manny, actually, my shout for manager we should have gone for in the summer was Carlos Cuesta, who's the first team coach at Arsenal. And basically, to be fair, he's not directly from Pep, but he's from Arteta. And Arteta said that he's responsible for basically improving the shape over time. And yeah, my point is, or even we could have gone, I think his name is Danny Evans or something like that. Basically, there's an assistant manager who is doing also at Enzo. We could have got one of those to stay on. Because, I think to be a little bit fair to Steve Cooper, where he's a bit unlucky, it's not often that the entire coaching team leave. That is quite an upheaval. If you had even one person there who did the drills, it could be like, how you doing, Steve? Yeah, well, this is how we did it last season. You can have a look at it. If you want me to run those drills, I can do it. Having no one is quite brutal, I would say.
I mean, I've got another. Yeah, absolutely. And Ajax have appointed 35-year-old Francisco Farioli, who I think was De Serbi's second in charge.
Yeah.
I forgot to. Oh, you can add Marseille to my list. I just remember De Serbi too. So smart traditional clubs who know what they are doing. They are going out. They're not looking for experience. They're looking for guys who've been trained. And like Anil said, whether it's Arteta's assistant, I've been trying to give a shout out for Enzo's assistant as an option for us down the line, Willy Caballero, especially since he's been here for a year and he's worked under Pep directly himself too. He's worked under both, and that helps. Plus, he's Argentinian, so we can get some other Argentinian under 21 lads in, which I always love in our squad. So, I mean, I don't want to hate on Steve Cooper. I've got nothing against Steve Cooper. He's a nice guy. He's an individual. And he has the potential to, in my opinion, maximize our potential. People think we're hating on Cooper. We're not hating on Cooper. Cooper will probably keep us up, reasonably fine by the end of the season. But I'm not really interested in just staying up. I want to build to get back to where we were. And that is my ambitious objective. And in order to do that, you need to have an identity clear in your mind. You don't need to stumble into a system and realize it. You need to be fully believing in it, and there is no compromise whatsoever. Even in the 95th minute, if you're a goal behind, you're still going to be playing that exact same way no matter what. And Steve Cooper will never have that mentality because he's not gone to system school with Pep, where it's drilled into you. And I think we just need to find somebody who has that system in their mind, and forget about experience. It's overrated.
Mate, that's literally word for word how I feel genuinely from the heart. We'll close with this. Anil, anything else you want to add to this? I got to shoot in 10 minutes, guys. I've got a preview. Thank you, Manny, that was an awesome rant. Anil, what do you got planned for this week?
Just doing Match Day Live. I've already dropped the match preview where you can see those animated GIFs in more glory. So I'll be doing that. So yeah, thanks everybody. It was good to have this talk.
Thanks, man. It was good to have you, and thank you so much, Manny, for coming on, mate. I really, really enjoyed having you on.
Mate. Always fun.
On again soon. All right, guys, you can catch me in 10 minutes doing a fan opposition preview with a lad from Forest. Jump across to that if you want in 10 minutes. If not, thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next one. And you'll see me with Anil this weekend doing the post-match reaction and blue tinted glasses for the Match Day Live. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.
I think we need to get Manny on one of the post-match reactions. That's what I'm feeling. So
mate, you're welcome.
One question quickly before you go. Let's see if we can get it. Which shirt is that? There's the sponsor.
Fiorentina.
Very good. What year?
Is it 97 when Batistuta was on fire?
They started a bit earlier, but that's the era. And funny if you say that. Who's on the back?
Oh, this man's like my
Batistuta. I love Batistuta.
He's got good taste. That's all I can say.
Have a good show, Luke. Cheers, mate.
Thank you, mate. Catch you guys.